Hey guys, what's going on? Mike here, and I'm joined by Justin, and 2024 is far behind us already, so we're deep into 2025, and that means it's time for the best e-bikes of 2025.
And
the worst.
The worst.
We're actually gonna cover some of the worst ones too, so if you like a little bit of that drama and you wanna know the best e-bikes of 2025 under 3K, stick around, and let's get into it.
Okay, so as Mike mentioned, in this video, we're gonna be covering bikes that are priced under $3,000. In fact, the majority of them are gonna be under $2,000. So they're gonna be more the omni-channel direct-to-consumer brands like Electric, Aventon, and Rad Power bikes, those types of ones. We will not be covering bikes that are a little higher performance like Specialized and Trek.
And we totally understand if we didn't cover those. Half of you at home would just thrash us in the comments because there's a ton of good bikes north of 3K.
Yeah, but at the same time, if that's all we covered, there's gonna be a lot of people that don't wanna spend that kind of money. So that's why we're breaking this into two videos. Again, this first video is gonna be under $3,000. The next thing that we're actually gonna do though is we're gonna break this up by category. A lot of people aren't quite sure if they want a fat tire, if they want a folding, a commuter. So we're gonna give a little bit of overview of which type of bike would be good for you, and then pick 2 to 4 bikes within that category that we think are top notch and that we can highly recommend.
Yeah, you're not gonna see any one bike being the crowned winner of any category because the reality is we may test 10 to 20 bikes in any given category. And then out of those, there's generally always a few, 2 to 4, like you said, 2 or 3 that just rise to the top and just outperform their peers. And so we'll let you at home make your decision on what you think is best out of those few because only you know how you'll use the bike and what you want out of your e-bike.
Yeah, it's kind of the analogy that I like to make. It's, you know, we can't really pick a winner because it's kind of like a Ford versus Chevy, Honda versus Toyota, where you're going to have your personal preference and it might be based on a brand. But there's also a lot of really good bikes in each of these categories. So that's why we don't have a winner, and we're just recommending a handful that, again, we have thoroughly tested. We know these bikes and these brands really well.
Yeah, so if you know what you're looking for and you already kind of have your idea in mind of what you think the best are and you just want to see our picks, just jump ahead and you can get right to those. If you're kind of new to the shopping experience or you just want to have a refresh on things to look for, some examples of really bad e-bikes, we're gonna go cover those as well first. So it's up to you how you enjoy this video, but let's get into it.
All right, so to start off, we're actually gonna dive into a handful of bikes that we do not think that you should buy.
Yeah, these are bikes that we definitely do not recommend, and for good reason. We'll go kind of line by line and discuss that, but yeah, what to stay away from.
Yeah. Okay, so first up, it is the Happy Run electric moped. Now this is for sale on Amazon. The full title is 1500 watt moped style electric bike, adult bikes, 48 volt, 18 amp hour removable battery, 60 plus mile, 32 mile per hour top speed, dash, all-terrain fat tire electric bike for mountains, snow, sand, road.
Well, at least it's got a nice ring to it.
Very nice ring to it. It's $499. And the things that really stand out about this bike is, first of all, 32 mile an hour top speed being advertised. That's just blatantly against what the CPSC defines as a bicycle, what People for Bikes recommends with their 3 class systems, and it just straight up is not going to be legal in almost any scenario.
I've not seen any town in any America where you can take your recreational trails over 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, so if they're advertising that, that's going to be a problem down the road. And I actually expect further things like the law that California just passed to come out. So that's definitely a big flag. Next thing, Happy Run is a brand that I've never heard of. I mean, we've been doing this for quite a long time. We reviewed hundreds and hundreds of bikes. I don't know that brand. And one thing that is another thing just to pay attention to, you'll notice if you go to Temu, if you go to Amazon, you have all these random brand names you can't pronounce, you don't understand. That's actually a strategy because in order to sell on Amazon, you have to be able to trademark the name, the brand. And so if you pick something random, it's easy to trademark.
Yes.
You can come in, sell something cheap. If something happens, you just change the brand name at the factory.
Fly by night, you're gone.
Yeah, and they're gone. And so no brand recognition, no attempt to build a brand is another red flag when you're looking to buy an e-bike.
Right. And that doesn't mean that some of these brands won't grow into become brand recognized, but the way they're listed are certainly a lot of red flags. Like For example, none of these bikes from Happy Run that they list have any sort of safety, durability, UL, anything, any sort of safety certification standards. And while to some people that may not be a huge deal, that can really mean the difference between a bike that could potentially be dangerous and one that's fit to be in your garage.
Yeah, and also read the details. Like I think this one claims to have racing braking.
What is that?
And then EABS, so that'd be anti-lock brakes, which does not exist.
How much is the bike?
Yeah,
$500?
You're just not getting it there. So a lot of red flags on this one.
No. Next one we have for an example is the Ridstar E26 Pro folding fat tire mountain bike. Now there's some glaringly wrong things with the title. I've never heard of a folding mountain bike, nor would I do anything mountain bike related on a bike that folds, because you have some pretty high potential for the weak points to kind of fail on you.
You're telling me that Trek and Specialized are coming out with a folding EMTB here, Sam?
No, and if they do, our cameraman can test it, because I'm not doing it.
Yeah, no way.
And then the funny thing about this, I went to look deeper at the bike and I was going through all of its specs. It literally does not fold, but it's advertised as a folding fat tire mountain bike. So lots of just buzzwords they're throwing into these titles that turn out to not even apply to the bike. That's a huge red flag when you're shopping.
Yeah, and this one takes the speed even further. So again, patently not legal. Assisted speeds up to 37 miles per hour. Well over the 750 watt nominal motors. So just a lot of, again, same red flags there.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We love to go fast, but not on our recreational paths in town. That's just not what these are designed to do. And on this website, I kind of dug a little further into it, and there's even parts where the website is not filled out. It has like placeholders like enter advertising text here. It's very, very low effort, very not polished, and the product descriptions just don't really make any sense. So this would be the last place I'd be entering my credit card in.
Yeah, if they're not going to put the time to like really follow the laws and the regulations, if they're not going to finish their website, I don't know if they're going to take care of you 2 years down the road.
Did they finish assembling your bike?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, it's just hard. Now this next bike is going to be probably the most controversial, and technically it's above $3,000, so it's breaking our rules, but that's okay because they break some rules too. It is the E-Cells all-wheel drive Monstar 3,000 watt, 60 volt, 80 amp e-bike.
All these bikes have a name that just flow right off the tongue.
Yes, and I know even as we described this bike, like Jaden, our cameraman, he got excited. He's like, this is going to be fun. This bike would be fun. And yes, while it might be fun, there are some issues with it.
Yeah, this is a bike. Now, I'll give it a compliment off the bat. It's got some cool components, some name brand, like it's got Shimano Dior drivetrain, it's got a RockShox rear air shock, it's got Maxxis tires. I mean, they're putting real like name brand, reputable components on the bike in some places. I don't know about every bolt, nut, and frame and linkage, all those. But I would say just because they put good parts on it, the execution and the type of bike it is, it's just not hitting the mark.
Yeah, when you see advertising that again blatantly contradicts what is legal in most places, unless you're just off-road on private property, where this bike goes, is it 40 or 40?
They say 45 plus.
Yeah, so I mean this bike goes incredibly fast, and yes, like there are some really good components. You can tell that E-Cells is like literally trying to build something that again is probably really fun.
Yeah.
But it's just not going to be legal. And when you have a bike that looks like all these other bikes, it's not going to prevent somebody from riding down a city path.
Yeah.
And that's where we start to get into trouble because there's no distinction.
Correct. That's kind of the overarching concern here is you want more people on bikes, more people out enjoying their e-bikes out on their public trails. But if we have all of these like wild west of e-bikes where half of them are going upwards of 50 miles an hour, it's just going to create more rules and more problems for the rest of us who just want a normal e-bike and want to ride. So 40 plus miles an hour, 45 plus miles an hour is super fun, just not on a bike with pedals.
Yeah, and so just kind of bottom line, a couple of the key takeaways. There's one, look for like UL certification.
Or any type of standardized certification, safety testing.
Yeah, look for a brand that you know and that's good. And really, if you just want to go that fast, again, I know there's a ton of people that do, that's fine, but you really should be looking more at an electric motorcycle, not...
Yeah, there's a whole market for that.
Yeah, not just an e-bike that you throw some pedals on to get out of license and registration.
Yeah, you're just kind of curving the rules, but ultimately I think it's just going to end up costing all of us in the end with some extra regulations on e-bikes that we don't need.
Exactly. So again, these are just examples of things that we don't recommend because we do want to let people know that we are fairly particular on which bikes we bring in. And we're going to go over that criteria next on what we think is a good e-bike.
All right, so this next section, we're gonna go through and kind of just share with you guys our own process, the things that we found that we end up looking for the most and what makes a good e-bike and a good e-bike brand. These are just lessons learned after testing and working with now hundreds of e-bikes.
Yeah, and so the first thing that we look at is the brand. Is it established?
Does it have a real story? Does it have a real like contactable office that you can reach? Are they a legitimate brand who's communicating who they are, you know, from the gate? Or is it kind of a mystery like some of these lesser known bikes we just talked about in the previous section?
Yeah, and I would say we're kind of like, we made a lot of big strides in the last 5 years.
Oh yeah.
Where before, you know, a lot of the better bikes, they weren't UL certified, they weren't UL tested. I mean, that can cost like 50 to 80 grand per bike.
Yes.
So for like a new entrant to do that, it's really hard now. So we're starting to see some definite separation between kind of the fly-by-night, just flipping bikes from Alibaba to real brands that have established themselves and are doing good jobs. And the next thing is, you know, these brands are also following the guidelines that the CPSC states and the recommendations from people for bikes. So you know that they're legal wherever you live.
Yes. 100%. And things that really kind of come into play, we mentioned earlier, but things like UL certifications, like Justin said, that can be an expensive and lengthy process for a brand. So once they've kind of made that investment in their bikes and kind of gone through that process, they're kind of sending a message to their base and their potential buyers that, hey, we're in this for the long haul. We've made these investments and we want to make sure we're making safe bikes.
Yeah, so it's UL 2271.
That would be like the battery, the bike itself. You have ISO 4210, which is going to be like durability testing on it, or EMTB testing. Just things that show this brand is taking this seriously and they're investing in their products. Yeah. And then another big factor is the bike using quality, reputable parts? And that can be very subjective to who you are. I might think the only quality drivetrain is a Shimano XT, and some people might say otherwise. But it's gonna come down to parts that if you took this bike to your local bike shop, would they know the tires, the wheels, the derailleur, the cassettes, the shifters, or are they some no-name brand that doesn't function properly and they can't really diagnose it? Those are kind of the differences that are gonna kind of make or break that experience of owning the bike. It's easy to look at the cool bike and just click an order, but once you own it, you gotta service it and take care of it, and you're gonna need those real parts.
And that kind of leads us to another really big key is customer support.
Yes.
Right? Our brand's gonna support you post-sale, right? Like you have motors, controllers, batteries, displays, torque sensors, cadence sensors. Like there are things on these bikes that not every bike shop is necessarily gonna have. And so one thing that we look at, again, in this video, we're covering a lot of more, what used to be strictly DTC. So direct to consumer, where you just buy them online and that's it. But now they're starting to build out their dealers.
They're popping up
IBDs.
everywhere now.
Yeah, so the independent bike dealers, right? Where if you buy, say like an Aventon, they have hundreds of dealers across the nation.
Yes.
And they're continuing to build these out. And that's helpful because even if you buy it online and get a really good deal, you can still take it in and get it serviced by a repair shop that hopefully has some of these parts on hand or can help facilitate getting those replacement parts from the company.
All right, so that is enough of the kind of general housekeeping ground rules for this. Let's jump into our best e-bikes of 2025. And Justin, what are we kicking it off with?
We're gonna kick this off with the best folding e-bikes.
Folding e-bikes.
Now, folding e-bikes are bikes that have really just taken off since 2020. You know, in kind of the classic sense, a folding bike's kind of hard to do. You have to to have the frame still rich enough, they've got to be heavy. So until you put a motor on these things, you're just not going to see very many folders. You've got some old school Bromptons and some other ones that are kind of like that, but they're just very different bikes.
That's a big European thing too, although they're making their way here.
Yeah, and so folding bikes, you know, they're just a really good option for a lot of people. So walk us through, again, who you think would be good for a folding bike.
I mean, folding bikes, they're not only kind of convenient, but they're going to be good for anybody who, first off, just wants a good bike. So for example, my mom has an electric XP that we just talked about. That's a bike that I don't think she's ever folded, nor do I think she even cares that it folds. She just likes that bike. It fits her well. And she just rolls it into the garage, parks it in there, and then gets on it when she wants to ride. But it's also going to be great for anybody who wants to fold it up, put it in the back of their truck, strap it to their RV, or maybe you have just a sedan and you can still fold it up. These almost all fit in any trunk, and you can take it up to a national park and go ride it around for the day and then go home without needing a trailer or some e-bike specific bike rack.
Yeah, so they just kind of expand your adventure.
Yes.
And just make it a little more versatile on that. And so with that being said, the first bike we want to highlight is almost kind of like the OG. It's the one that took off just incredibly and might be one of the most highest selling micromobility vehicles, period.
I see them
in
everywhere.
the US. And that is the Electric XP. I would say the Electric XP, when we first got the 1.0, right? Like the looks were just kind of unconventional, really boxy, just not what a cyclist would normally expect a bike to look like. But it's kind of become like this cult following where now that is exactly what a folding bike should look like. And people love it.
Oh yeah. Super, super popular bike. You see it all over the place. And I think for good reason. So it falls in that sweet spot right around $1,000, $999. And for a lot of people, that's the top of their budget or the budget they kind of want to stay at. And for that price, you're getting the practicality and versatility of being able to fold to a smaller, form factor and use it anywhere, but you're still getting a great bike, which cannot be said for every folder out there. It's also got their PWR programming. So you're getting some more premium features, which is where they take a cadence sensor for the motor, but they kind of give their own programming to it that makes it feel a lot more intuitive, a lot more natural. Dare I say, almost like a torque sensor?
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in general, it's got solid build quality. So we've had a few XPs through all generations for years now in this warehouse. We ride all these all the time because we test them against new models when they come out. And they've really stood the test of time. They've got a really solid build quality.
Yeah, and I would say that the XP 3.0 really is perfect for returning riders. People that haven't ridden a bike in 10 years, 20 years. We've had people that haven't ridden a bike in 50 years that jump on these. They're just very approachable, very easy to swing your leg over. The fatter tires just make it nice and comfortable. RV, truck friendly, and then also backed by Electric. Like Electric is just, they're very focused on customer service. They really care about it. And if any of you have any issues, if you buy Electric from one of our links and have issues, just let us know because they will absolutely take care of you.
Yeah. And then I'd say the only downside, if I had to think of a downside on the XP, and this applies to all bikes, so let's not just say it's for the XP, but they're generally kind of heavy because you've got this heavy duty hinge and folding mechanism. It's part of the design. But these can be around 70 pounds. And for some, that's not a big deal. But I would say even at 70 pounds and folding up small, you might be tempted just to grab it and throw it in the back of your truck or trunk. It's still kind of a two-person lift. They can be a little awkward when you lift them.
And I would say even if you can lift it, because I've done a lot of lifting on these bikes, I also tend to ruin my pants with the chain and the grease. So just be careful when you fold it. This goes to all the folders again.
Yeah.
But I do wish they just had a way to like stay closed when you fold them.
Hint, all the manufacturers.
Yes, exactly. And I guess the next bike has actually made an attempt at that. So what bike's next?
So that is the Ride One Up Portola. So the Ride One Up Portola was Ride One Up's answer to Electric XP. They saw the success of it. Clearly there's a market demand for it. And they said, okay, we'll throw our entry into the bid. And frankly, the Ride One Up Portola really did a solid job. This time they went for more of what they consider to be a more modern look. So it's got softer lines, rounded corners. It's just a little bit more modern looking than the boxier style of the Electric XP. And part of that design includes, in what I think is a good feature, it's just easier to remove and replace that battery because it's externally mounted versus the XP where you're gonna have to open up that frame and slide it out of the tube there.
Yeah, and I would recommend on the Portola, if you can, to spend the extra $200 and get the long range battery.
Yeah.
That one did test a little bit better for us. It does bring the price from $1,000 to $1,200. So in line with Electric's long range battery as well.
Yes.
But that's where I think the Portola just does a little better job. And as I look back and kind of my thoughts on the Portola, like it's very obvious that they came after the Electric XP, where the motor, so it's 65 Newton meters of torque. It's really peppy up hills, just a little bit more than the XP. The front fork, it's 80 millimeter travel with 32 mil stanchions.
Right, that stiffer, more responsive ride,
It's a really good feel on there. And then they kind of came out and also with their R1 CBC programming. It's not a torque sensor, it's a cadence sensor, but I mean, I think you agree, it feels a lot like how Electric's PWR.
I'm a big fan of brands that do go that extra mile and try to get some programming into their cadence sensors to make them feel a little bit more premium. And for sure, the Ride 1 CBC feels really good up there with Lectric's PWR. Really, just dollar for dollar, it's a very solid value if you're looking for a folder that, after this many years later, still holds up really well.
Yeah. So that's the Portola. What's next?
We have the Velotric Fold 1. And now Velotric's Fold, this is their entry into the folding e-bikes. And to me, they did some really cool design and features on this that kind of, I think, make it stand out. So one of them, it's got the lowest standover heights out here with 15 inches. So that's 15 inches from the lowest point of the frame to step over. And depending on how long it's been since you rode a bike or your concerns about having to toss your leg over a high step bike, this just makes getting on and off really easy. And then they paired it with a really nice, punchy 750 watt motor, which makes it really fun to ride around. It's got plenty of pep, and I think with 70 Newton meters of torque, it's just a really good combo that complements this bike.
Yeah, and for me, one of the standout features is their payload.
Yeah, so massive. Yep.
440 pound payload, and the bike is tested to UL 2271, 2849, and then also ISO 4210.
That's right.
And so it has really nice lines, nice looks, good range. We got about 50 miles on it. And it's just really stiff and just feels like it's a bike that it's gonna last a long time.
Yeah, it might be considered slightly higher priced than the others at around $1,200, but if you compare that with like the long range version of the Portola, it's more of an apples to apples at that $1,200. And then one other thing I think is really solid about it, it's got one of the easier folding processes. It's a 3-step process, like a true 3-step process that generally has been really smooth when I've done my folding and unfolding on this bike. And not every single e-bike that folds is an easy process, so kudos to them on that folder.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's still heavy. Just again, if you can't lift 60, 70 pounds comfortably, just like what we said on the XP, same thing applies to the Velotric. But I do like that folding mechanism. And the other thing that I just want to point out is a lot of people aren't as familiar with the Velotric brand. It's one of the newer brands, right?
I do think that's changing though.
Definitely changing. Yeah. They've come out with a lot of bikes, good solid engineering, and just in general, we've been impressed with them. And it just, I think part of that, where one of the founders came from Lime. He was one of the original people in Lime. I'm not sure exactly, but they definitely have some money there.
And some experience in distributing, this type of product.
Exactly. So you do get a really good spec bike, a little less of a brand, but if you want to take a little bit more risk than like Electric or a Ride 1 Up, you're going to get a good quality bike there.
Yeah, and I would even say, they're between all their testing, the UL certifications, the ISO, they're really investing in putting forward quality products.
Exactly.
So that is the rest of all of our best folders. Let's jump into the next category.
All right, the next category is best fat tire e-bikes.
Yes.
Now, fat tire e-bikes are really good for people who, they may want to ride around town, commute to and from, just kind of cruise around town as well, but they want to go maybe a little bit off trail and do some exploring on multi-use paths and trails.
Yeah, and I think these fatter tires, people like that stability. It gives you a more stable ride. You can hit more imperfections, curbs, roots, rocks, and not get jostled around like you would on thinner tires. And I think that's why we see so many people who haven't ridden bikes, frankly, in decades, still gravitate to fat tire bikes once they ride them, because it's got that confident, inspiring feel when you ride it.
Yeah, they really do feel safe, very comfortable. And another standout feature I would say is the geometry, where you're not fully aggressive like a mountain bike.
Right.
You're a little more upright, a little more relaxed. And so people can just ride them a little bit longer, a little more comfortable, but still take it off-road a little bit.
Yeah, that extra capability. So what is your first one on the list for best fat tire?
First one on the list is the Aventon Adventure 2. Now, the Adventure 2 was kind of the first fat tire bike that we reviewed that had hydraulic disc brakes and an integrated battery. And so it just kind of had the look and also just the feel when riding. It was just a really good quality feel and what I would want out of a fat tire bike. It's a little bit crazy to go back in time and think about all these bikes that, the battery was it just didn't look really good. They had mechanical disc brakes.
Which is wild on a big fat tire.
These are big, heavy bikes. And so when Aventon came out with the Adventure and added those hydraulic disc brakes, it was just a really good move.
Yes.
And it's just a good bike overall.
Yeah, and when you factor in kind of that off-road capability, that upright, relaxed posture, it's just one of those bikes it's easy to ride, and I think it's been a crowd favorite for years now. And kind of the market's spoken. It's a bike that people have gone to many times and people are very happy with.
Yeah, and it ticks all the boxes of what you want on a fat tire.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it does look nice. It's got the 750 watt motor, very powerful and peppy, has a nice torque sensor so you can modulate your speed without having to change the assist levels.
Yes.
If you want to go 15, you go 15, you go 20, etc. Hydraulic disc brakes and just all the way around, just everything that you would need in a good fat tire bike.
Yeah, it's been a staple for a reason, and I think it's well deserved on the list. With that said, what is your next bike on the list?
Next one is the Electric X-Peak 2.0.
I would say arguably this is the best value in fat tires right now.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to argue that, right? Like the price, I don't know how they do that, kind of classic with electric. But what's interesting is this is a refresh that came really quickly after the Electric X-Peak 1.0. Electric is very...
Shed some light on that 1.0.
Yeah, so they're very aggressive. They want to be the best selling in every category that they do, and they weren't with the fat tires.
Right.
And I want to give them credit because they took a step back and said, okay, why aren't we the best selling? What do we need to improve? Because that first model kind of had a few misses, right? You had the step through, kind of had the wobble reports.
Flex, yeah.
The brakes were a little bit on the weak side. The shifters were above the bar shifters, so a little bit clunky when you're going off road. And then I do like their cadence sensor, and it was their good PWR cadence sensor. But when you get off road, I find you usually kind of want more of a torque sensor type bike.
So the good thing about that is, it missed the mark in those areas, and that can happen, right? But Electric very quickly released this 2.0 version, and they kind of touched on everything. So they kind of beefed up the frame, they redesigned the frame and made sure it was stiffer, eliminating that step-through flex that we had last time. They beefed up the brakes by putting a larger 203 millimeter rotor up front with a 180 in the rear, which is a really solid combo, especially for like technical type riding, off-road riding. They added Shimano trigger shifters under the bar, which is just a personal preference for a lot of folks. And they have a torque sensor now with their M24. They call it M24 stealth technology, which is a really fun way of saying they just made the motor quieter, which I always appreciate. And then they got it MTV certified under ISO 4210-10 standards. So really went above and beyond, and somehow they brought all these new features and a better bike for the same $13.99 price, which kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, it's just every time you go to electric event, you're just always kind of like, hey, what are they going to do now?
Yeah.
And when on the X-Peak, when they put that, the front fork, that Manitou, it's a $400 fork on a $1,400 bike.
Yes.
And it is, like you mentioned, ISO 4210-10 EMTB certified. It's just really good value, and that's going to be tough to beat. I do have a feeling that Aventon is going to come out with an updated Adventure at some point here soon. And so I think they'll kind of clap back a little bit.
Good luck on price.
Yeah, good luck on price, but we'll see. But overall, again, that X-Peak 2.0 is really good.
100% agreed. All right, what is your next on the best fat tire?
Okay, so the next is actually kind of a slightly different approach. So this is Rad Power Bikes, their Radster Trail that they released. And this is actually more of a mid-fat category bike where instead of 4-inch fat tires, they went to 3-inch fat tires.
So slightly more narrow.
Slightly more narrow, but what that does, it actually really gives the bike kind of a more crisp, kind of fun, sporty handling feel.
Yeah, it gets a little more playful in the handling, and frankly, you might lose a little bit of cush from that extra volume that you get in 4-inch tires, but you're going to increase the agility of the bike, so it's going to be a little bit more playful, a little more responsive. But it also is not going to be as well, it's not going to handle as well like in deep sand, deep snow, like a wider 4 or 5-inch tire would do. But if you're not worried about that, those 3 inches are really fun to ride.
Yeah, and I would also add, the way that they did that frame, it's just very stiff and just adds to that fun, responsive ride that I love about the trail.
Yeah, and Rad, they did something unique last year with 2024 where they introduced a couple of these bikes, and there's been a lot of hoopla about battery safety and e-bikes, and that's for a whole different topic. But I will say, so they've got the UL certifications, UL 2271 to 2849. So they're kind of already invested in the safety standards. But then they did something unique that I really like. They have what they call Safe Shield technology. So they took their batteries that are already UL 2271 certified, but they designed them in a way where each individual cell inside the battery is kind of encased in a thermal barrier that's, in theory, should one cell get too hot and have an issue, that would prevent a thermal runoff and the whole thing just going up in flames. So was it necessary? No, but is it awesome that it's got that little extra bit of protection? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and frankly, I kind of hope more the industry adopts that.
Yeah, same.
I really want to give Rad 2 thumbs up for what they've done there.
For sure.
And just overall, the bike just ticks all the boxes of what you need on a mid-fat type bike. And I actually find myself recommending this to people who want a fat tire, but maybe they have quite a bit of riding experience and they don't necessarily need that super stable planted feel of a 4-inch fat tire, but want something a little more sporty and nimble.
Yes.
Or say you've been riding an e-bike for a while, you've been on a 4-inch fat tire, you're ready for your second one. Maybe you want to consider stepping down to the 3-inch and just, again, get a little bit more performance and sportiness out of it.
100%. And their colors this time, the maroon colors, the tan sidewall tires, the 100 Newton meters of torque. It's just a really fun, capable bike. But with that said, what is your next or last one on this best fat tire?
Okay, so the last one is actually a full suspension fat tire that doesn't suck. So that's the Moped Obsidian. And again, keep in mind, these bikes are under $3,000.
That's
so
the big factor,
full suspension can be kind of hard without making it super divey and floppy.
Yes. Usually when you get low, I hate to say lower end, but let's be real. When you start talking mountain bikes, full suspension over $3,000, you're getting to some really premium rides with really plush suspension systems. And under 3K, especially under 2K like this bike falls.
Or 2,200.
22,
yeah,
excuse
so
me.
Not under, but close.
But right around that 2K mark, it's like, okay, what's the trade-off going to be? And so they found a rear air shock, but that's actually adjustable. You can, dial in your sag. And it's just a linkage system that just works. And when you ride this, you're like pleasantly surprised. When I saw the full suspension come in, I was like, we'll see how it actually rides. And it rides pretty good. It was surprising. They did a good job on that.
Yeah, and we've actually had riders up to 300 pounds ride this. And that shock did a fantastic job. It held up, provide good cushion, but just then when I say diving floppy, it doesn't just
Clap
bang
out,
right?
yeah.
Like it's just a good, it's $130 air shock, but it makes a difference. So it's really good. And just overall, when I look at the bike, good brakes, good geometry. It has that cool kind of power inverter station that so you can charge
And solar
some
panels.
devices with it.
Yeah.
When you're camping or whatever. Just overall good bike. My only note on this, it's not really a complaint, it's just a note, is that seat post is kind of short, right? So they talk about it, I think, for 5'6" to
6'8".
Yeah, 6'8". So that's a 14-inch,
which is
that
massive.
they say it fits to. I'm going to say it doesn't really. It's 6 inches of difference on seat post.
Yeah.
So the math just doesn't math. So I actually think this bike is best for people that are 5'6" to 6'2". And if you are taller, you're going to want to probably swap out the seat post for something longer.
Yeah, definitely. To me, it's one of the most comfortable fat tires on this list, largely because of this full suspension just done right. And kudos to them for figuring that out.
Yeah, good job to Moped on this one.
Nice. So that wraps up best fat tires. On to the next.
Yeah.
All right, so the next category in this list is going to be the best commuters. And commuters are going to be, well, like they sound. These are the bikes that are good at getting you from to work and back, to school and back, whatever errands you're running. They generally will have like lights, fenders, rear racks, so you can put bags on, take your gear with you, even swing by a store on your way home and have somewhere to put your stuff. They're just going to be efficiently good at getting you to and from your destination. We're gonna stick to bikes that are in the class 3 designation. So what are your thoughts on that?
At least for this segment here. And the reason why we're kind of leaning towards bikes that have class 3 capabilities is here in the US, it tends to be a lot of places that are urban-y, sprawly.
That's a new word.
I'm making up words as I go. But think Las Vegas, think Phoenix, these towns that just have suburbia spread out for miles and miles. You might have a 10, 15 mile ride to and from work, but you're also gonna have to get on the road and keep up with traffic a little bit. So being able to hit class 3 speeds, in our opinion, in that scenario, makes it a little safer. Whereas for a more dense urban environment, think New York City, you may not get to 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And so though that bike is gonna need a little bit different, we're gonna cover that in the next section.
Yes. So with all that said, kick it off with your pick for best commuter.
So the commuter that I mean, we're gonna cover a couple of bikes, but the one that really just shocked the hell out of me this year was the Electric One.
I mean, that shocked everybody.
Yeah, it just really did. It's one of the most kind of impressive bike releases of the past year. And I could talk about this bike all day long, but when it really comes down to it from a commuter standpoint, it has everything you need on a commuter. Yeah. It's fast, it's peppy, it's comfortable to ride, has good racks, good lights, just everything that you need. But there's some really cool tech packaged in this bike that's just over $2,000.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's got everything you need. I would go as far as to say it's got a lot more than what you would need. So the kind of the star of this show, and the reason why we said it was a shocking release, is because it's got the pinion and gearbox, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's generally reserved for bikes that are more premium, more high-end, generally on bikes over $5,000. So it's internally shifting. So you don't have a rear derailleur you got to adjust and deal with. You can shift under load. When you come to a stop, no matter what gear you're in, it'll downshift for you so you can restart without being in a heavy gear. It's just a really cool system that has very little maintenance, no mess, no fuss. And again, usually reserved for high-end bikes, and it just makes this little commuter really fun to ride. It's also got a Gates carbon belt drive. So with a carbon belt, instead of a traditional chain, you're not gonna have the chain grease and lubrication all over your pant leg when you're riding to work, which is kind of a big factor. I don't know how many pants I have ruined with permanent chain stains, but, and it's very quiet. So a chain or a belt is not gonna have the chain noise. It's got hydraulic disc brakes, a very punchy and fun motor that I would give a slight caveat. Be careful with the motor because, well, I'll let you tell them.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen the video where we compared this against a $12,000 Stromer, but when we went to do the drag race, we put in like the highest setting. You don't have to do this, but it is so punchy that it actually almost threw me off the back of the bike.
Like right off the line, that front wheel went up. So just a really cool bike.
Yeah, it's fun, it's cool. It really is a great commuter bike for someone who loves all the tech and, just wants to have all the latest gadgets type thing. It's just a great bike.
It's almost like its own talking piece. Yeah. It's a really fun little zip around traffic bike.
Mm-hmm.
And so that takes us to the next one, the Rad Power Bikes Radster Road. What are your thoughts on that one?
So the Radster Road it's a very different bike than the electric one.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, the electric one, you got the 20-inch wheels. The Radster Road, you're going to 27.5.
Yes.
And so I'd say this is a little more classic commuter. You get class 3 speeds. Rad is very similar to the Radster Trail, where it actually has a lot of the same frame and everything. But included you get the 100 Newton meter torque motor,
which is super fun and powerful. I like that motor,
especially up hills. But it's still just comfortable upright Dutch position. So it's just a really good feeling bike in general.
Yeah, they have good looks. They ride really nice. And then they have, like we talked about earlier with Rad Power, they have that kind of extra step they've taken with their safety. So you get your UL certifications, but you've also got that Safe Shield, which is kind of that fire prevention, thermal runoff protection, just kind of going above and beyond with their safety. And then you share the same frame as the Radster Trail. So really you're taking just smoother, faster rolling tires for the road version. But in theory, you could have a second set of off-road tires for this, and you kind of would have a Radster Trail or road, depending on what you threw on.
Yeah, and that frame does make the bike a little heavier. It's right around 75 pounds.
Yeah.
Which is on the heavy side for a commuter.
But not crazy for e-bikes.
No, and it really just does ride so well, so much so that it's a bike that's been in my garage for the past 6 months.
Well, that's a testament in itself.
Yeah. So, and it's actually my daughter she does a lot of the range tests, and she's ridden, hundreds and hundreds of e-bikes. She's a Nika rider, rides really hard, and her school's about 10 miles away, so 20-mile round trip. And so I was like, hey, instead of driving all the time, she asked me, she wanted a bike. I said, sure, coming in, which one would you pick? I didn't influence anything. And that's the one that she chose, which was kind of surprising to me.
I think it says a lot about the bike. You take Asha, who, does so much cycling and riding and racing, and for her to pick that, it just kind of, to me, says all you need to know.
Yeah, even someone who loves cycling, loves gravel road biking,
high performance bikes,
picked this bike because it's a really good commuter.
Yes, 100%. All right, so the next one is the Electric Express. And the cool thing about the Electric Express is it comes in either a 500 watt or 750 watt configuration. And I'll be honest, when I got this for testing, I took a look at it and I was like, we'll see. There's nothing that stood out to me as it being kind of a fun new bike. But when I rode it, I was really surprised. It had a couple fun things going for it. So At first, the 500 watt motor I thought would be the less punchy, less powerful. I thought it would be kind of reserved and tame, but in reality, it's very confident, very peppy, just feels really good. But more important than that, to me at least, is it's virtually silent. Very, very little motor noise. And when you ride the 750, that's got a little more motor noise, which is fair. It's a higher wattage motor. But frankly, if I bought one of these, I'd go with the 500. It feels plenty fast, and I was really happy with it.
Yeah, I would say, when I look at the Electric Express, really the standout is the price, right? There was a long time where brands were trying to hit that price point of $1,000 on a good bike. And the fact that they've been able to do this with a bike that has a good kind of Dutch style geometry, so it's very comfortable to ride around.
Super cozy, yeah.
It's got good hydraulic disc brakes. It even has a front suspension fork.
Yeah.
And you don't usually see a bike at this price range with that type of spec that still, when you ride it, it's just still peppy and fun.
Yes.
No, it's not a $6,000 turbo Vado, but if you need a commuter bike, you're on a budget, I don't know if there's a better bike that you can pick.
It's
than that one.
Hard to beat. It's a very comfortable, it's got a wide cushioned seat. Like you said, the Dutch cruiser bar. So you're kind of just like very relaxed in how you ride it. The tires are a really nice, like smooth commuter tire, but they still have traction for wet pavement and things like that. And they just roll really fast, really quiet. And again, it's a lot of good bike for the money.
Yeah, it is.
All right, that wraps up our best commuters. Now let's move into the next category.
Okay, next segment is the best lightweight urban commuters that, to be honest, this is kind of Mike's jam. So Mike, tell us what these bikes are and who they're for.
So these are for the people who commute to work. They like taking their bikes everywhere they go. They don't want a giant fat tire e-bike. And they want to kind of lean into still being able to feel like they're riding a bike. Some of these don't even have throttles. These are leaning into I want to use my bike to get around and really improve my fitness without just throttling all the time like some of these bikes kind of want you to.
Yeah, they're really good, again, in that urban environment. If you're in an apartment, they're lighter weight, so you can just pick them up, carry them up the stairs. They're very nimble through cars and traffic. And just overall, I find these bikes to be generally very attractive to people who love cycling.
Yes, they're the kind of bike that from a distance you would never know was an e-bike.
Exactly. So with that being said, what's the first one on the list?
My absolute favorite one there is right now, which is the Ride One Up Roadster V3. If you haven't taken a look at this bike, I would highly encourage you to check it out after this video. They put a whole lot of really cool features and just a cool bike in general for $1295 as the price point. It comes in a couple different configurations. You can do a high step or a step through frame. When it comes to drivetrains, you can do a 9-speed, like a 1x9 chain drive, or you can do a single-speed Gates carbon belt drive. So you've got a lot of flexibility right up front, and there's no change to price regardless of which that you choose. It's just giving you some flexibility in how you want your bike to be kitted out. It's a lot of value. You've got a 500-watt motor, 50 Newton meters of torque, and I would argue that this is probably one of the best motor sensor combos on the bikes of this list right here. I just feel like it really complements this bike.
Yeah, I would agree. Like this bike, when it got in, we were just kind of blown away by some of the specs. Initially they launched it with the Shimano Dior, which is kind of that like first level of Shimano
Getting
that's
into
kind of
like
more
big boy
performance
components,
that I would never expect at around $1,200, $1,300 at all. So I really like that. They've since moved to the Microshift Advent, which is a comparable drivetrain. You got the Selle Royale saddle, which is very comfortable. And then you got the Schwalbe G1 RS tires that I know you want.
Dude, it makes me, first off, kudos to Ride One Up for doing it. But as someone who gravel races and trains a lot and puts a lot of effort into my cycling, I was looking at new tires for my gravel race bike, and I was looking at Schwalbe G1 RS tires, and I thought, oh, it's a sick tire, but at almost $90 a pop, we're talking $200 for a set. Even I was like, no, I'll just opt for something a little bit cheaper. And then it showed up on this bike, and I could not get over it. So
yeah,
they're awesome tires.
Again, just the bang for your buck on this Ride One Up has kind of gone beyond what we expected. But even when you step back and look at the bike, the sleek lines, the low profile branding, just everything about this bike kind of says high performance and a lot of fun. Again, just at a really good price point.
Yeah, I was looking at some user reviews and just looking at, people's feedback of the bike, and somebody online had posted a review of theirs, and they had swapped out all the alloy parts like the handlebars, stem, seat post, even the wheels, and went carbon. And they've got it down to 27 pounds. It just looks sick. It's just showing that it's a really good bike as it is, but if you wanted to upgrade it or play with it, if you're the kind that likes to do that, you could really make a super cool lightweight, like stealth fighter bike.
Yeah, you can. And I do like how they put more of a gravel, like a nice high-end gravel tire on it, because at this price point, you can actually take this off-road and do some gravel riding and just have a lot of fun in a way that you wouldn't normally see on an urban city bike.
No, and the 45C tire, so 45C is just basically a measurement. So you got a 29-inch tire or 700 tire. With a 45C tire, and that's a really good balance of having that almost 1.5 inch width, but still having grip, traction, speed, cushiness. You can air these down a little bit to low 30s, and you can just rip on gravel, and it feels really good on this bike. They just did a bang-up job.
Yeah, exactly. So the next bike on this one is the Velotric T1 ST Plus. And this one, again, it's kind of a bike that takes a slightly different approach, but when we got this one in, it also kind of like blew your socks off and just really was just impressive from Velotric. It definitely leans more into the healthy fitness side of things because it doesn't have a throttle, but it's still lightweight, still performs really good.
Yeah, and at just 39 pounds, it's one of those bikes that, again, you can carry it up a flight of stairs if you need to. You can move it around yourself without needing to worry about your back. You can throw it on any bike rack and it's just gonna be able to hang there without breaking any standards. So just a really good lightweight bike. But then you've got all the perks of like class 3 speeds. You got front to back lighting, rear racks, UL certified 2849 and 2271, and then just the overall clean, slim lines. Again, 10 feet away, you would never guess that it was an e-bike.
No, you wouldn't. And, it's a 350 watt motor, not the 500 watt that you get on the Roadster V3, but it is very quiet.
It's a good one, yeah.
And it still is peppy. It's a little more peppy than what I would expect out of the 350 watt, and just in general provides really good performance, again, as that urban city commuter bike.
Yeah, 100%. So what is the next one? It's the 10Ways Seago or CGO 600 Pro. What are your thoughts on that one?
This one, to be honest, actually just straight out of the box, the first time I rode it was actually to go hill test it, and I was just shocked at their performance. It's only 37 pounds, very sleek, very lightweight, but just the overall power and performance, silence. I mean, there was just, again, there's a ton of things on this bike that are just really good.
If you watch my review on this bike, I think I said, my gosh, it's so silent, probably 10 times. Because, you get quiet e-bikes, and then you get bikes that are so quiet, you have to look down and make sure it's working. Because, you can feel it, but it just doesn't, it messes with your head a little bit. It's so quiet. It feels like it floats down the road. Super silky ride. I couldn't speak highly enough of how it rides. It's very smooth. Some cool factors about it though, you can do the 8-speed drivetrain with a chain drive and a rear derailleur, or you can go a single-speed Gates carbon belt drive. Again, no change to the price, but just nice having that flexibility. And they also went with a 700 by 45C tire, so you've got that nice balance between narrow tire for speed and light rolling resistance, but not so narrow that it takes away from the ride experience.
Yeah, I'd probably say, like, if I'm searching for like a con on this bike, is probably that it just doesn't have any cage mounts. Right?
Such an odd thing to me too.
And that's it. That's one thing that I would love them to do. The other, if you notice right now, it's not UL certified, but they are in the process and they already have the European certification. So I've never seen a brand that gets the European certification then fails the UL. So I'm very confident that that will happen. Obviously, if it doesn't, we will update you and let you know. And then on paper, again, when you see that 350 watts, you might have a tendency to think like it's underpowered, but this is not. Like this is really peppy, powerful, but also very natural, even when you're hill climbing. It's just overall, I actually like the rear hub motors, that Moped motor, which is the same brand as what you get on the Roadster V3, just a little bit less powerful spec-wise. But overall, when I'm hill testing, it's just slightly behind, but it's even more quiet. So if that's what you're going for, that really stealth, quiet, natural bike, this could be the one for you.
Yeah, it's a really clean, slim-lined bike. It's got that battery pops in and out, super easy. Just all in all, bang for buck, super good bike. But that takes us to our last one on this list, which is the Aventon Solterra 2.5.
And kind of before we dive into that, I just want to point out, like, this is a category that now we're on 4 bikes, right? Yeah. This is kind of like almost the category of 2024.
Yeah, these bikes had a moment this year.
Yeah, it's just so many good ones came out. And the Solterra 2.5, I think, is right in line with all the others.
Yeah, 100%. It just right off the bat, it's got the same cool, sleek look that these bikes have. At $11.99, it's priced really well. You got a rear hub motor with a torque sensor. You got integrated lighting. And then they added turn signals. Not every bike comes with turn signals these days, and they're not always done right, but in this one, they're done really well. They have integrated them into the frame's seat stays, so they look very slim, look like they're just part of the bike, like built into it. And they're easy to use, so it's nice having those features as well. And then you have Aventon's app, which is a nice, clean user interface. You can track your rides, you can track your bike. Just a nice little setup for the price.
Yeah, I mean, I also love the torque sensor and how it just feels. That's just a personal thing that I've always liked the Solterra. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just always been one of my favorite bikes from Aventon. I think they just did a good job on the 2.5. Yeah. The only thing that I would say is the tires. They are very fast rolling. So the 700 by 38C, and it's more of a slick profile. So if you want speed and you're not worried about that traction, then you're gonna love those, love those tires. But if you are someone if it rains a lot, or if you're just a little bit worried, you might wanna replace those with something a little wider, a little bit more grip. But other than that, the bike, with the improvements that they did on the geometry, the braking, et cetera, just really good job.
Yeah, just an overall bump in specs from the last version that all in all just makes the bike edge out a little bit better each time, and another solid pick.
Yeah.
All right, so this next category is one that I think a lot of people find useful, and that's the best SUV style e-bike. What are your thoughts, or what to you makes an SUV bike?
Yeah, so SUV is kind of a newer category, I would say. Mm-hmm. And just like cars where you've got SUVs, they're larger, they're great. I mean, most people buy them to take their kids to and from school, go to Costco, et cetera. But you can kind of go off-road a little bit with them. Mm-hmm. Nothing like a Jeep Rubicon by any means. It's not a rock crawler, or some of them are four-wheel drive, some aren't. Similar thing with the bikes. There are bikes that you can do a little bit more with. They're really good for commuting. They're really good for riding around. They're very comfortable. You'll have racks to almost not quite like a cargo bike, but kind of like a cargo bike where you can go make a grocery run. But then you also got generally some suspension, some good comfortable tires, and you can go off-road. So it's a little bit do it all on a bigger, more comfortable bike.
Yeah, it's jack of all trade type bikes. And so the first one we've got is the Velotric Discover 2. Now this is one of those bikes, when people ask what we do for a living, I get the follow-up question to what we do is always, well, what's the best e-bike? And the reality is, I can only answer that by saying, well, how do you want to use it? And if they don't know, I recommend SUV style bikes, because it's one of those bikes that if you don't know what you need an e-bike for, or you want an e-bike that can do a little bit of everything, here we are. And I think this Discover 2 is kind of just a shining example of it, because it comes in at a really nice price. It's got tons of versatility. You got your suspension on it. You've got a nice upright, comfortable riding position. In fact, the comfort on this bike is immediately noticeable. It's one of those bikes that you can sit on for hours, which we do when I range test a bike, and you don't feel fatigued or tired when you're done riding this bike. Super, super comfortable.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that Velotric really has leaned heavy into the tech on this bike.
Yeah.
Right, you've got the sensor swaps, so you can switch between the cadence and the torque sensor in the display or the app.
Well, and how many times have you been asked what's better, torque or cadence? And how cool is it for this bike? You could be like, well, play with them both.
Exactly. And I do actually think that for some people, they prefer cadence and some people prefer torque. So it's kind of nice. You can play around with it. And it's just kind of a cool little tech thing built in. But they've also got Apple Find My. They've got over-the-air updates. They've got the Velotric app. And just Velotric really is putting a lot into the tech side on this bike. They've even got an extra USB-C kind of port to charge things while you're riding. So really cool there.
Yeah. Little things. Type-C USB is always better than Type-A. I don't care what you guys say. It's just a lot of premium features and a lot of good everyday practicality and a price that is not, shocking. It's a good setup overall.
Yeah, $1,800 is just
Feels like a lot of bike for that money.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it still is a lot of bike. So
yeah.
So great bike. So next up.
So that's going to be the Ufree Stellar Falcon. And Ufree was not really on my radar before I got this bike for testing. And I was pleasantly surprised with the bike we got and how it performed. And we've had some other bikes since then, and they continue to be just as good. So this is something very confidently recommend. The Stellar Falcon, their paint jobs. So when I think of the Stellar Falcon, I just think really nice looking bike. It's got good paint jobs that have like a deep color to them. They accent them well with like tan sidewall tires. They just look really good. And speaking of tires, these are 2.8-inch Schwalbe Johnny Watts tires, which are kind of an all-terrain tire. And at 2.8 inches, you're getting that almost benefit of a mid-fat tire bike, but you're still on this SUV style bike, kind of do a little bit of everything. It just does really good. And then you've got step through or high step frame options. So you've got really a well-rounded, comfortable bike.
Yeah, definitely well-rounded, definitely comfortable, but also still powerful.
Yeah, plenty of power.
It's a nice 750 watt motor, has 90 newton meters of torque, and so good hill climbing capabilities. I mean, lots of get up and go. But it also has a low standover height, so that 18 inches makes it really easy for the step-through version, makes it really approachable for people. Maybe if you have some hip mobility issues, et cetera, it's just easy to get off and easy to get on, which is kind of a surprise in an SUV type bike. And just in general, just very comfortable. That front suspension fork is an air fork, which you don't generally see.
Not often at this price.
No. And then also with the seat post suspension, just makes it very comfortable. So if you're someone that doesn't want to feel the bumps in the road, this is definitely one of the top picks.
Yeah, but it's still got all your everyday commuter features you're gonna want. So you've still got the practicality of having, you know, a rear rack, front to back fenders, and front to back lighting. In fact, their headlight on this is 200 lumens, which is a pretty powerful headlight. We see all sorts of headlights on e-bikes. They're not all very bright. This one's super bright. It's also got a strobe feature built into it, so you can opt to have your lights flashing while you're riding, another nice visibility thing. And then they integrated an SP Connect phone mount into the stem. Now, that's a small thing in general, but it's just those little touches that just add to its everyday practicality.
Yeah, and it's also those little touches. You know, the price on this bike's $2,200, right? It's from a brand Ufree that a lot of people haven't heard about yet. And so first glance, some people might be like, oh, that's a little much for a newer brand. But you look at all the components. It's Tektro, it's Bafang, it's Shimano, like everything.
Yeah, these were like thoughtfully selected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you need to take this bike into a bike shop, it's not gonna have a hard time being repaired.
No.
And Ufree is really starting to build out their network of dealers. So they've got about 180 is what I understand right now. And just very impressive to see the growth of Ufree and the attention to detail.
Yes.
You know, I've had several conversations with the founder, Daniel, and he's, you know, engineering background, brought that background in to make bikes for his sister, because he didn't see a ton of people going after bikes for women. Obviously, he's expanded since then, but just every time they expand, just good quality all the way around. And so I think if you slapped a Specialized sticker on this, you would think, oh, Specialized made a rear hub SUV bike. This is kind of surprising. Not Specialized, you save some money there, is a rear hub, not a mid-drive, but just overall, I can't say enough for how much I actually do like that bike and how well done I think they did with it.
Yeah, it's a testament to them as a company. And in general, I would say one thing that made me kind of sit back and make them a little bit higher on my radar was when I heard about them and got the bike, I went to their website. And sometimes you go to a bike company, especially a new bike company, and they haven't really figured out who they are yet. And they may have 15 different models that cater to all different types of riding. And it makes me feel like sometimes brands are just making any old bike to sell it. Ufree has, I think, two, the Stellar Falcon and the City Robin. Is that the only two they've got?
I think so, yeah.
And they just did them well. And so I appreciate the fact that they slowed down, focused on making good bikes, not just a ton of bikes. And I think it just really shines through. Just well done overall.
Exactly.
All right, so this next category is the best cargo or utility style e-bike. Now, normally these would be divided into subcategories because you do technically have short tail cargo and long tail cargo, but we decided to merge them into one. Just go ahead and talk about why we did it.
Yeah, I mean, we did that because most brands have both. They've got a short tail version and a long tail version. And really the only main difference is how long the tail is.
Yeah.
And so we put them in at one. And really, if you're trying to decide between the two, what I generally recommend is if you have 2 kids that you want to put on the back or a lot of groceries, then go with the long tail version. If just one child or less groceries and looking more for like a utility style, then go with the short tail version. And that really is kind of the main difference between the two. And it's a category that's actually one of my favorite. I've got a handful of kids, and it's a type of bike that I just end up kind of going back to over and over again.
Yeah. And so with that said, what is your first pick for best cargo utility bike?
Okay. So the first pick that I want to cover is the Aventon Abound SR. Now this bike was kind of game changing a little bit for me.
It was impressive.
So let me explain that, right? Where 4 or 5 years ago, you really never saw any comparisons of Aventon or Rad or Electric, any of these more DTC brands to the Specialized and the Trek. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the Aventon Abound SR, which bike do you automatically see?
The Specialized Globe Haul?
Yeah. I mean, you can tell Aventon looked at the Specialized Globe Haul and kind of went after that, but just at a much less price. And I just think that's very cool from an industry standpoint to see these more lifestyle brands coming up and building stuff that actually compares to the legacy brands. And then also the legacy brands finally, also recognizing, hey, it's okay to do a rear hub.
Yeah, we're kind of seeing
yeah, exactly. We're seeing them kind of come down together. And I just really like that. And the Aventon Abound is just a really good bike in general.
Yeah, they also added like a whole slew of new tech to this bike. So it's got like a new, updated, really cool looking display control. And then you've got the ACU, which will allow you to do things like geofencing. So basically you can set up a GPS perimeter for your bike. And if it was to be moved outside of that, that would activate like an alarm system that would also lock the kickstand in place, which is a really beefy, like dual leg kickstand. And so no one can pedal this bike away, and you're certainly not picking it up and running away with it. So you just got some really cool kind of, I would say, kind of a tech forward approach on this bike. And you can even tune and adjust the motor sensitivity or the motor adjustment as well.
Yeah, we actually did that quite a bit because the model that we got was it was technically a pre-production model where they were still tuning the motor. Mm-hmm. And we actually worked with Aventon, giving them feedback, and then they push an update out. Mm-hmm. So you get over-the-air updates, they could change the motor, the torque, and you can actually do that yourself and kind of play around and find exactly what you want. For me, it did take a minute to kind of get used to this torque sensor and how it felt. But once I got it down, I really did like the bike.
Yeah, it's really a lot of great bike, especially a cargo bike like this at a great price of $18.99. They just did a really solid job with this refresh.
Yeah, I also just wanted to throw out that I'm glad, like when they originally launched, it was about $2,200, and they dropped that down to the $18.99.
That seems more appropriate.
I think the $2,200 is fair, but there's something about that $2,000 mark that I do think people start looking more at the Globe Haul at that point, and so I was glad to see them drop it down to $18.99.
That's right. I didn't think about that. Because Globe Haul's what, like 26?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And so you do get a lot of tech in this that you don't get on the Globe Haul, but it's just a branding difference. And I just like getting more people on bikes in general. So I really like how they did that.
For sure. All right, so next up is going to be the Electric Expedition 2.0. Now this is another one of those times where Electric brought a new version to the table, added a bunch of cool upgrades to it, and somehow kept it at $13.99. So that you can tell $13.99 is a really aggressive price for this, and they just did a really good job with it. So now they went from a cadence sensor, it now has a torque sensor. They really beefed up the frame, which on a cargo bike is really important. They stiffened up that frame, so when this thing does have a load on it, gear on it, your family on it, or whatever, just having less flex and less maneuverability and a stiffer frame is always gonna be a good thing. Now they've got 50 mils of front suspension fork on it and a new color display.
Yeah, they really kind of pack a lot into this.
Yeah.
And I'm also very impressed with the payload. So it's 450-pound payload capacity, 300 pounds in the cargo area, so you can really carry a lot on this.
That could be like 2 kids.
Yeah, and you also have good range. So 60 miles on the standard battery, up to 170 miles I mean, we haven't fully tested the 170 miles.
I don't know if I want to do that range test. Yeah.
But when they actually, we went and covered it down in Arizona. They haven't sent us the full bike yet. When they do, we will long range test it.
But we did get hands on it and ride it in Arizona.
Yeah, so we'll let you know. But I would expect that to be about right. So it's really long range, really high capacity, and of course, like electric, they just throw tons of free stuff at you. Actually, I have heard some people complain that you can't deselect those things.
Yeah.
So like this one has the running boards, it has the seat cushion, the upgraded headlight, and a suspension seat post, all for tons of value. And you just don't see that under $1,500.
No, $1,399 is a super aggressive price, and you're getting a lot of bike for that money. I don't really have cons for this one. I think if I was to, just get something extra on this, I'd like to see maybe a 4-piston caliper brake setup on it, just because you've got this massive 450-pound payload. You're potentially having a lot of cargo, maybe even family members on it. And so braking beefed up is always going to be a good thing. But with that said, the current system is fine. It stops fine. I just always opt for a little bit more braking on a cargo bike.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't do it all.
No,
yes,
and they did
especially
a whole
at this
lot,
price. Yeah, it really is the best bang for your buck when it comes to a cargo utility bike.
Yes. And last on this list is the Rad Power Bikes Rad Expand 5 Plus. Now, this was another one where the previous version, the Rad Expand 5, had been out for a while, and we were all kind of ready for the refresh to see what they brought to the table. And what were your thoughts on this 5 Plus version?
So I was incredibly impressed with how stiff the bike is.
Yeah.
And that's why when we were kind of debating, do we put it in the folding category? Do we put it in the cargo utility category? We chose to put it in the utility category because you cannot tell that it's a folder when you're riding it. No. It is the stiffest folding bike that we've seen. And so we thought it earned a spot in the category of cargo, where obviously it still could be a folder.
Yeah.
Like when it came in originally, I was expecting maybe a little more of a refresh on the design and the aesthetics. But the more I looked at it, I think it just makes a ton of sense because the battery, it is the external battery. It's not integrated, right? That was kind of my initial beef. But the more I used it, I found it really nice that you could remove the battery. You could charge it inside, or if you are using the folding capability, take that out and you lose some weight. So just overall, super stiff, really good option for both categories.
Yeah, and then because it's a Rad Power bike, part of their recent releases, it's got that battery safe shield technology as well as the UL certifications. So they just kind of go that extra step in your safety and certifications, which is always a positive as well. And then it's got a nice 330-pound capacity, which your own body weight and whatever extra cargo is quite a bit for you to haul, on your ride, especially for a folder.
Yeah, and so it is kind of a wild pick. And if you wanted kind of a more traditional pick from Rad, you could look at the Rad Runner 2, kind of their classic utility bike, or their newly redesigned Rad Wagon. Both of those would be great picks. Again, we just wanted to highlight this one because of the extra versatility as a folder.
Yeah, I mean, if you were the person who's kind of on the fence about a folder and kind of on the fence, or maybe you should get a cargo bike, this is kind of meeting you in the middle there. So that wraps up the last of our best cargo and utility e-bikes. And let's go on to our next one. All right, so our next category is going to be the best cruiser for e-bikes in 2025. Justin, how would you describe the cruiser category?
So cruiser, I mean, is pretty
You mean you cruise?
right? It's pretty self-descriptive where you're out looking to just chill, relax, cruise around. And so the handlebars are going to be much more swept back, right? And you really have kind of two different styles. You have more the Dutch style cruiser, where if you look up anything with Amsterdam and bike, you're going to see where the handlebars are slightly swept back. You're more upright. And again, it's a very comfortable position to ride around. Then if you look up like Malibu or Newport Beach, you're going to see handlebars that are very far back. Beach cruisers that are straight right up. Handlebars are almost straight out. And it's just it takes that Dutch cruiser and makes it even more laid back.
Yes.
And so really cruisers are for people who want to just cruise around, have fun, very popular at the beach. My wife prefers a cruiser because she has like some neck issues. And so she doesn't like to be hunched over a lot. And so that's where she likes that more upright, either classic Dutch style or more beach style cruiser. And so those are the types of people that, again, really do like them. They're very comfortable, very fun to ride.
Yeah. And our first one on the list is going to be the Blix Soul X. Now this is a newer one from Blix that we got I'd say over the summer or maybe into the fall of this last year. And I got to test it, and I'm generally kind of skeptic, or not skeptic about cruisers, but just cruiser's not my go-to choice of bike. I'm more of a road bike, gravel bike, mountain bike kind of guy. And so I never really had a lot of interest in cruisers in general. But this is one that after spending a few weeks with it, riding it, testing it, just having to do that work on it, when I was done, I was like, this is one I would actually own because it really is just a fun bike to ride, super comfortable, probably one of the most comfortable bikes that I had recently. And they did some really cool things with some of the tech too. So this time around on their X series, so the Soul X, they went with what I call like autopilot, which is a really overly dramatic term for it, but it's basically hybrid automatic shifting to where based on how fast you're going, how hard you're pedaling, and the gradient on the road, it does the math on the back end and then does the shifts for you. And they also have auto PAS mode, which is instead of going through PAS 1 through 5, you can just set it on auto PAS. And then depending on how your ride's going, the bike will figure out when you need more juice and when you need less juice. So it just takes a lot of those small steps of thinking out of the ride and just lets you just kind of cruise.
Yeah, and I'll say again, we kind of got this bike pre-launched, which happens a lot with us. And so we had to kind of work through some of those bugs and things like that. And I actually still think they're improving it, which in this case, I think it's a positive because the bike can be updated over the air. And so as they continue to improve that, they'll be able to just make it even better. I'm not a personal fan of the auto shift type stuff, no matter how high end, even if it's on a really high end pinion. I like to manually shift. And I like the fact that on this bike, you can manually override that and shift it all on your own. And the shifting is very crisp and smooth for, again, this type of level of drivetrain. Just really good job. And when you pair that with how lightweight the bike is, I just think it's a really attractive bike for people that want a cruiser style bike that's very approachable, easy to handle, and easy to maneuver. This is one that I actually had the previous version of the Soul in my garage for about 2 or 3 years because it was my wife's and daughter's favorite, my younger daughter's favorite bikes. This one actually took a step, made improvements, made the bike better.
Yes.
With the auto shifting, with just the overall technology into it. And it feels like they made it even a little bit lighter. So just a really good beach cruiser overall.
Yeah, lighter is actually a really good point. This is one of those bikes. Sometimes the cruisers, because they're kind of big floaty rides, they can, just a lot of material, they can feel kind of heavy when you're moving them around, but this one is definitely on the lighter side. And I'd even say that 750 watt motor they put in it is pretty beefy for this bike. Maybe because the bike's lighter weight, but that motor just feels really strong on this bike. It's just a really comfortable, fun bike to ride with some really cool tech, and it certainly deserves a nod on this list. All right, so next up is the Aventon Pace 500.3. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is the 3rd edition of the Pace and is probably one of Aventon's most popular bikes. And it's just a really good classic, more of a Dutch style cruiser. You have kind of a shorter wheelbase. It's a smaller bike in general, which makes it very approachable, easy to get on and off. And I mean, it's always hard to explain this on video, but just the ride quality of it, it's just kind of zippy and fun.
Yeah.
And it's a bike that I end up recommending a lot to people who may be a little bit older, that haven't ridden in a while, but don't want a fat tire, and they want to still feel comfortable. Actually, even a lot of people that have ridden in a while and want to move on to an e-bike. This is a very common bike that I recommend. And I've also even had my more middle teen age kids jump on this bike because it's safe. It's, good frame, good feel, just all the way around, and they really appreciate that.
For me, it ticks a lot of important boxes. It's got hydraulic disc brakes, app connectivity. The Aventon app is really nice. The 500 watt motor feels strong for being 500 watts, and it has the integrated turn signals into the frame, which Aventon is kind of unique to Aventon, and I just think it looks really good and it's very practical.
Yeah, and also I do like how it is. They ship it as a Class 2, but you can unlock it to Class 3 if you want to utilize this as more of a commuter.
Yeah, which is probably good for, California right now.
Yeah.
All right, so next up is the Electric Bike Company Model R. Go ahead and kick off your thoughts.
So the Model R and just any bike by Electric Bike Company kind of fits in this category. They are arguably, I think, the most beautiful, most customizable bikes.
I don't think it's arguable.
Yeah. All they make is the beach cruisers.
I mean, they really just own that space.
Yeah, but you can go online, you can pick out, I don't even know how many different colors of the bike. You can even do a custom job where you can put your logos or whatever. So if you run a small hotel off the beach, you can brand it with that.
Yes.
And they're just very beautiful. You have lots of different options with different handlebars. They're starting to trim down some of their options in terms of the different
Yeah,
bikes.
consolidating some of the models.
But they kind of needed to, because they had like 8 and they really more just like 3 bikes. So I like what they've done. If you don't like the look of the Model R, you can look at the S, you can look at the other ones that they have, because they're all that beach style cruiser, very Newport Beach vibes.
Yeah.
And just really fun bikes.
Yeah, they're kind of the staple, like true American beach cruiser. And then with all the customization, it's just, there's no other bike company I think like it right now, where you can just take every aspect of that bike and say, I want to make it my own this way, that way, this color, that material. It's just really neat. They have their own in-house woodworking shop, rim shop, paint shop. They really are kind of a next level bike company when it comes to making the bike your own. And then the ride on these is surprisingly like, think of like the late 70s, early 80s, the big floaty sedans down the road, just big, overbuilt and cruisy comfortable. They kind of own that space as well. And then EBC, or Electric Bike Company, also goes a little bit further with the shipping process. So all the bikes that you order online generally come mostly assembled with sometimes you have to put wheels on and handlebars on and seat posts and parts. But with EBC, they do oversized freight shipping, and they put the bike in an oversized box after it's been thoroughly inspected by their mechanics, who signs off on it and puts a little certificate in there with it. But then ultimately, when it gets to your house, you open up one side of the box and you roll out a complete bike that is essentially ready to ride. You just flip up the handlebars and tighten the screws, and then just give everything a once over, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, this is a US made, I mean, they don't make the motors, they don't make the derailleurs, et cetera, but they really do assemble everything here.
Yeah, they just source raw materials.
Yeah, they source raw materials and build them in the United States, ship them directly to you. They're just really good performing beach cruisers. Yeah, I mean, if I'm not the one putting the bike together, I always get a little bit nervous. I always check everything. You know,
I would always tell people to check it over.
But it does come all fully assembled, and it's really nice. They do spend extra money on the shipping there. And really kind of my only con on the Electric Bike Company bikes, it's not really a con, it's just something to notice, like, because of how they're built and what they are a little bit more heavy, but they don't ride heavy. They really are like the Cadillac, the 70s Cadillac.
Big floaty Cadillac. That's exactly how they ride to me. I think even with the looks, they kind of just have that old classic car vibe. They're just cool,
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so this last category is going to be the best high performance e-bikes. So we're talking things that are truly like performance oriented, things like EMTBs, gravel bikes, road bikes, just bikes designed for performance.
Yeah, and in the past, if we were making a video for best e-bikes under $3,000, we would not have been able to put a high performance bike in that category, because it wasn't until this last year where we started to see some of those bikes in that price range. You traditionally had to go with something like a Specialized or a Trek, and those always start around $3,000 or $4,000, if not even more, when you're getting into electric mountain bikes, electric gravel bikes, road bikes, etc.
Yeah, but now we finally have the ability to do that, and we think this is one of the coolest trends we've seen in the direct-to-consumer e-bike landscape, and that is building high-performance like bikes that really do hang with the big boys. And so we couldn't be more excited about this trend.
Yeah, and so the first bike that we wanted to highlight is the Aventon Rambless. That is Aventon's hardtail EMTB that they launched at the beginning of last year. And it was also one of those bikes that was incredibly kind of shocking to me. I mean, they called us up and told us that they were going to do this before they launched it, and just to pick our brains. And I said two things. Number one, don't mess up the geometry. Like when you're talking to mountain bikes, like actual people that are go mountain biking all the time, if you try to just throw something together that's more of like an Adventure 2 with like skinny tires and don't get the geo right, no one's going to buy this thing, and it's going to be a total fail. The second thing I told them is don't mess up with the motor. If you're doing a mid-drive, it needs to be responsive, it needs to be predictable, it needs to be powerful. And they just, again, this is a brand that wasn't known for making these types of bikes, to come into the market and start competing with the Specialized and Treks.
I was blown away with
this. Like especially with Trek launching the Marlin Plus, like they had some competition coming in, And honestly, they nailed it. They nailed it. They knocked it out of the park. The geometry on the bike is super fun, modern, handles really well on the trails. I mountain bike quite a bit, and that was the funnest bike launch that I've been to in a while. And the motor, 100 newton meters of torque, it's maybe not quite as dialed in as the Bosch or Shimano. The noise on the motor is a little bit more like the Bosch. Bosch just updated, so it's quieter, but the older Bosch, kind of the same sound. But giving it those extra newton meters of torque really did make the bike perform really well and was just super fun out on single track.
Yeah, I mean, some people may argue that this A100 mid-drive maybe is not as refined as like a really high-end Bosch or Shimano, but I would argue that it is so close. If you don't ride these bikes day to day like we do, you probably would not even notice the difference. It feels very good. And we do, like you said, a lot of mountain biking. We both help coach our kids' mountain bike teams, and we spend a lot of time on bikes, especially single track. And this is a bike that can hang with mountain biking. And that's not something that many, I think they're the only one out there right now that's got a true EMTB like this. This thing is solid. It can just hang with the big boys. It's a real legit EMTB.
Yeah, if you are looking for a hardtail EMTB, this would be at the top of my list given the price under $3,000. I think it's $2,899 right now. They've been fluctuating a little bit, but just really good value given that it's a full power EMTB at that price. You just don't find that anywhere else. There's a few things that I kind of dinged it on. You know, it's not tubeless ready with the wheels and the tires. And then also the fork's not adjustable. But for me, you know, if you're between 180 to 200 pounds, that's actually pretty good on that fork. It's really only when you get up above 220, 225 that can become an issue. But heck, you can put on a new fork if you want on this bike.
It's got a
still
RockShox
come under
silo on there.
Yeah,
it's already a
RockShox
good
silo.
fork on there. Yeah.
But again, if you want something adjustable, you can put it on, and you're still going to be less than a comparable bike from another brand.
Yeah. It's just a very solid bike. Plus, component lineup on it is really good. You've got SRAM brakes, SRAM drivetrain, RockShox fork. It's just really well done.
Yeah, well done event on this one.
Yeah. All right, so that takes me to the next one, which is the Ride One Up CF Racer 1. And now, cool thing about this bike is it comes in either a road configuration, so like a true road bike, or a gravel configuration with some slight changes between the two. So if you go road, you'll have more of a narrow drop bars. If you go gravel, you have more flared drop bars, which is pretty consistent. Slightly different gearing between road and gravel, and slightly different wheel set specs. But at the end of the day, these are fully carbon fiber. So we're talking frame, fork, stem, handlebars, seat post, fully carbon fiber e-bikes, and they weigh 28 pounds. That's just like, that doesn't even make sense in my head. It's awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at that price.
Yeah,
for sure.
$21.95.
You know, like I actually did a lot of training for a 70-mile gravel non-e-bike race that I did, and I did a lot of the training on this bike. And there were some pretty washboardy sections that were not very fun, and that gravel or the carbon frame kind of helped soak that up a little bit. It just felt really good. And then on the looks, it is so clean. The internally routed cabling.
Yes. The one-piece handlebar and stem.
Yeah, it just does not look like an e-bike.
Nope.
And the interesting thing to me, when they launched this, it didn't have the cadence sensor. It did not have a torque sensor. It was the cadence with their R1 CBC system, but I can't tell.
Feels good.
Can you tell?
It's such a small difference. You really have to look for it. At the end of the day, when that pedal assist turns on, it very naturally and subtly ramps up. Kind of in the background, it's not surgy. It doesn't feel like you're getting a punch of acceleration. It feels like you just got a little bit better at pedaling. Got a little bit, started doing better. It just feels very natural. There's one gripe I had with it, and it's more of a reason for me just to go upgrade it. But really, the wheels are not tubeless ready, and here where we live, we get a lot of puncture flats because of goat heads and things like that. And I'd want to go tubeless just to have the ability to just change on the fly without pulling the whole tire off and all that. So there's a guy on YouTube I saw try to make this go tubeless. He really added extra tape, extra sealant, and it still just burps air and won't go tubeless. So in that case, just get some carbon wheels and you can knock another 1.5 pounds off the bike, which would take you around 26, which would still makes no sense. The only other complaint I would have on this would be the motor cable disconnect. Because you can't go tubeless, if you get a flat tire on that rear tire, that means you're going to have to remove the rear tire to pull it off and change it. But there's no quick disconnect for the motor cable, so you've got to keep that tire really close to the frame. Doesn't make it impossible to change a tire. It's just one of the things I think they could add a quick disconnect there and just make your life a lot easier.
Yeah, you kind of have to learn how to make it work. So the first tire changes, expect some more time there. But again, I would challenge anyone to find a better value for what you're getting on this bike. Two very large thumbs up to ride one up on the CF Racer.
Yeah, this was as shocking to me as the Ramble's coming out. It was like, how did they do this?
Yeah.
All right, so this last category is going to be our personal favorite picks.
Yeah, so we're sitting in a room literally of, I think, 172 bikes right now.
Which is one area.
Yeah. We have a couple storage units too. So we go through a lot of bikes. And, similar to how we walked you through this video, the different categories, everybody kind of has their own category that they gravitate to. And so we just wanted to highlight, we were given one bike each, which is really hard. One bike each that if we had to pick to take home right now, or maybe we've already taken it home, this would be the bike. So Mike, you're up first. What is your pick?
I mean, it's probably a no-brainer at this point, but the CF Racer by Ride One Up, I cannot get enough of that bike. I feel like it's just the perfect balance of like having a legit bike that can perform at a high level, but having that electric assistance when you want it. It's just I did some gravel bike shopping this year for personally because I wanted to get a new bike. And if I wasn't entering races or competitions, I would have just bought this bike because it's that good. But because I can't compete with it, for me, it's kind of a supplementary hybrid training solution. So if I've been training for months and I need a day where I just want to kind of kick back a little bit, not kill myself, but still get a few hours of spinning my legs, boom, CF Racer is perfect. If I want just a chill Zone 2 day to hang out with friends and go on a long ride and chat, boom, CF Racer is perfect. It's one of those bikes, when you add it up and you just take all the parts and look at this bike, you can't even figure out how they came to make a profit on this. It's just really well done for a really good price. It looks the part, it acts the part. It's very legitimate, and frankly, I'm a huge fan of this bike.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Yeah.
It really is. So my turn.
What about you? Yeah.
So for me, this was extra hard, right? Like I have a very wide range of like needs and things that I like to do on bikes. And so to pick one amongst all of them was nearly impossible. But if I have to, I'm going to go with a bike that actually, the name of the bike actually fits it perfectly, and that is the Electric One.
That's your one?
That is my one. To be overly punny. So the reason why and the Electric One, literally, it is one that I've taken home and that I use because it's kind of the perfect family bike for me, where I love riding it. It just has kind of like this sport zippy, kind of feel to it. Love the powerful motor, love everything that you can do on it. And my wife also feels very comfortable on it because it's a little bit smaller. The 20-inch wheels, a little more compact wheelbase.
But it doesn't feel small, even at my height when I ride.
No, it doesn't feel small. It feels really good. And it has all the racks that we need in order to, if we want to run to the grocery store, it's like a mile away, a little farther than I'd like, but jump on an e-bike and get there just as fast as I can in my car or my truck, save gas, load it up with the groceries, and it's just super fun. But then the tech nerd part of me just loves that pinion gearbox. I know they got a lot of press when it came out. I don't think they got enough. In general, the other reason why I wanted to give this why I'm giving a shout out to the Electric One is just a general shout out to Electric, what they've done as a whole of bringing the price of e-bikes down. E-bikes are very expensive. Even these less expensive $3,000 bikes, that's a lot of money, a lot of cash for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so seeing a company that consistently keeps the price low to where it gets more people out of cars and onto bikes, I just think the impact that has in general is phenomenal. Obviously, we're bike nerds. We're very motivated to get people on bikes, but tell me anyone who's not happy after they've gone on a bike ride.
Yeah. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Yeah. How many times are you angry after you get in a car and are stuck in traffic?
Can I say every day? Yeah.
Exactly. We're in a small town, right? It drives me nuts. So the electric one is just that perfect car replacement for me, for my family bike. Tons of tech, and the price, the $2,200 for that long range electric one, just fantastic value all the way around, and just really the one bike for me.
Nice, good pick. That's a really fun bike. So there you go, guys. That is our personal favorite picks, along with our whole slew of the best e-bikes so far in 2025. If you have any questions about any of the bikes we covered today, or maybe you just want to yell at us for not covering the bike that you think should have been on the list, drop a comment down below. If you haven't done so already, consider liking and subscribing. We're going to be doing a lot more long form, just kind of chatting with you content. And Justin, you got anything you want to add?
Just get out, ride your bike, and we hope to see you out on the trails.